Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to peel back the layers on one of the biggest puzzles out there right now. How is Russia, a country buried under sanctions, still managing to power a massive war? Well, the answer is pretty surprising, and it all comes down to a network of shadow allies we're about to break down.
So yeah, this is the big question, isn't it? We've all seen these unprecedented global sanctions designed to absolutely cripple Russia's economy. And yet, its war machine just keeps on running. It seems to defy logic. So how is that possible?
Well, the answer isn't some simple loophole. It's way bigger than that. What we're looking at is a complex, really sophisticated network with multiple layers, all designed for one purpose, to defy the West. So let's start at the top, with the most obvious layer of support.
First up, we have what analysts are calling an axis of convenience. Now, it's super important to get this right. This is not a formal alliance like NATO, not at all. Think of it more as a transactional relationship, where countries are giving Russia direct lethal aid, not because they're best friends, but because it helps their own bottom line.
And leading this group is North Korea. I mean, look at these numbers. It has basically become Russia's personal artillery factory. We're talking over 2 million shells and counting. That kind of supply lets Russia just keep up this brutal, overwhelming rate of fire that would be totally impossible otherwise. This support alone fundamentally changes the math on the front lines.
Then you've got Iran, which is playing a different but just as critical role. They're bringing their deep expertise in asymmetric warfare. And it's not just about selling Russia a bunch of Shahed drones. No, it's about teaching them how to build their own. By helping set up factories right there on Russian soil, Iran is giving Russia a self-sustaining assembly line for terrorizing Ukrainian cities.
So, you see, this direct military aid from North Korea and Iran, it's huge, no doubt. But honestly, it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's the part we can all see. This whole operation, though, it just couldn't exist without a much, much bigger partner, holding the entire thing up from below the surface.
So let's go down to that next layer, because this is where we find the true architect of this whole system, China.
Publicly, of course, Beijing is all about peace talks and neutrality. That's the official story they tell the world. But as we're about to see, what's flowing into Russia tells a completely different story.
And this is where the gap between words and actions just becomes massive. While claiming to be a neutral party, China is providing the absolute technological lifeblood for Russia's war. I mean, we're talking 90% of its microchips, the brains inside every missile, and 70% of the high-tech machine tools needed to build tanks. They're even shipping the raw ingredients for gunpowder.
And let's be crystal clear about what this really means. This support isn't just helpful. It is the difference between a Russian military that's collapsing and one that can keep fighting. It's absolutely essential. Without these Chinese parts, from the tiny chips to satellite data for targeting, Russia's entire arms industry would have seized up years ago.
So that leads to the next obvious question, right? How in the world is Russia paying for all this high-tech gear when it's been cut off from the entire global banking system?
This is where it gets really clever. They've built this brilliant, practically sanction-proof financial plumbing. Here's how it works. First, a shell company in Hong Kong buys the Western tech. Then, the goods get shipped through places like Kyrgyzstan to cover their tracks. But here's the magic step. A small, regional Chinese bank, one with zero exposure to the US dollar, processes the payment in yuan. It's invisible to Western sanctions. And just like that, the parts arrive at a Russian weapons factory.
And the result of that whole system? This chart says it all. You're looking at a near total dependency on China for the brains and the muscle of modern weapons. This isn't a partnership of equals anymore. It's a lifeline.
Okay, so that brings us to the very center of it all, the big why. Why is Beijing taking such a huge risk to prop up Moscow's war? What's the grand strategy here?
Well, the thinking is, for China, this war is a low-cost, high-reward proxy conflict against the West. It keeps the US, its main rival, distracted and bogged down in Europe. It turns Russia into a dependent junior partner that has to sell them cheap energy. And, maybe most importantly, it's the perfect real-world lab to test out how to make its own economy sanction-proof for any future conflicts.
This phrase really just nails the dynamic perfectly. China is essentially using Russia as a battering ram to weaken the US-led global system, and it gets to do it without firing a single shot itself. Moscow pays the heavy price, while Beijing reaps almost all of the strategic rewards.
So when you put all these pieces together, what's the big picture? What's the major takeaway from all of this for the rest of the world?
Here's the most crucial shift in thinking we have to make. The whole strategy of trying to isolate Russia has, pretty clearly, not worked. Instead of becoming a pariah, Russia has managed to turn itself into the central hub of a powerful new network.
And that network now has a name, the CRINK axis. That's for China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And like we said, it's not a formal alliance bound by some shared ideology. It's a pragmatic, flexible network built on mutual convenience and a shared desire to challenge the current world order.
And this changes absolutely everything. The war is no longer just a regional conflict in Europe. It is transformed into a global showdown of industrial capacity, of logistics, and economic strength. It's the West's industrial base versus this new, interconnected authoritarian bloc.
Which leaves us with one final, pretty unsettling question to think about. Because this model that we've just laid out, where a big power can essentially outsource its war, fueled by a network of shadow allies, this might just be the new playbook for how major conflicts are fought for decades to come.